Good afternoon, everyone. So today we have an interactive session with Ayan Jain, sir. So, sir, we are so grateful and thankful to you for giving us this time. I'm still in office, so I can show you my face. But yeah, mostly as Ayan sir and I actually we meet once in during the training for IPS, and and then when he was going for interview also when I was working the insights, I also took his one-to-one mock, and I was also telling to the insights people that Ayan sir is somebody who will surely clear, in the top 20. And this year he cleared the UPSC with an All India rank of 16. So let me just give a little background about Sir. He did his schooling from New Delhi, and he did his graduation in electrical engineering from IIT Delhi. He graduated only the year 2021. That means he is a very young officer. This was his third attempt in UPSC. Earlier, he got All India rank 87th. He is from the general category, so this is the reason why he got IPS. And in the next year, that is in the 2023, he got All India rank 16th, and so he is sure going to get IAS, right? And his optional is maths. So Ayan, sir, I would like to request you if you can tell something about your anything what you want to speak about the exam process, and if you have any queries, then you can go with that. So first of all, we are very thankful to you because you you give us the time to us, so this is like the beginning of your career. And so yeah, I would like to give time to Ayan sir now.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the introduction and also the opportunity. So, to give a brief introduction about myself, I started my preparation in mid 2019. I gave my first attempt in 2021, where I wasn't able to clear prelims. In my second attempt, I got rank 87, and this was my third attempt. My optional, as ma'am has said, was maths optional, which did affect my strategy to a good extent. And I managed to score good marks in both GS and mains. So, that is something I would like to talk to you about. So now talking about the exam this is certainly one of the most competitive exams of India. It requires a lot of effort, a lot of persistence. But the good thing is that people do clear, people from a variety of backgrounds, irrespective of their academic background, their economic background, they do manage to clear this exam through hard work and persistence. Certainly, strategy does play a major role, and it's undeniable that luck is also an important aspect. But hopefully, I can help you clear this exam through whatever I have learned in my three attempts and what I have learned from others also. So, beginning with prelims, I would like to begin with. Uh, Prelims is nowadays it has become extremely tricky, and it by itself, even though it is the first stage of the UPSC stage, it requires a lot of effort. Earlier, it used to be that only 2 or 3 months of prep used to help people clear the exam, but now it requires a good dedicated 4 to 5 months at least. So the prelim strategy has multiple pillars. Number one is having a strong command over static. So when we talk about basics like polity, economy, geography, history, the standard books, whether we talk about Lakshmikant, Spectrum, any book for economy, similarly the NCRTs, all of these have to be done thoroughly well. These will help you solve at least the basic questions, even though not too many questions are asked from the basics directly. But having a strong command over the static will help you solve many questions and build upon this base. Second, we talk about current affairs. So the current affairs for prelims is it does not go too deep into analysis. Rather, it is more about surface level facts, talking about basics. So my approach to prelims current affairs, number one, it has been based on the newspaper, The Hindu. And secondly, the approach has been to cover more topics with less depth. Because time is limited, you have to do static, current affairs, mock tests, everything. So having a very selective approach towards current affairs, that is important. How you build selectivity is through understanding what kind of questions are asked in the exam. Previous year questions are the best method for this. That holds for both prelims and mains. Continuously looking at the previous year questions and for mains also at the syllabus. This is going to be very important. So once you've got a good hold of what kind of questions are being asked in prelims, then you can accordingly align your prep towards it. especially for current affairs, because the material available online is just infinite. Thirdly, we talk about mock tests. So, practicing mock tests is a very good way to practice your problem solving skills, to simulate the pressure that we feel on the day of the exam, and also to apply your knowledge. Because if you look at the papers of the last few years, you will see that there are a lot of tough questions seemingly asked out of nowhere. But what is involved in them, in many of them, is the indirect application of your knowledge from something you have studied in static or current affairs or elsewhere. So, mock tests are a very good way to practice that. Fourthly, is your previous year questions, because we will find a lot of themes or topics that are repeated from the previous year questions. And also, we will learn about the important topics. Sometimes, even directly, questions are repeated. So, previous year questions of UPSC is something that is very, very important, especially the last 5 to 7 years at least. Another bonus that can be done for civil services is to do the other exams of UPSC just to practice them so that if a question is repeated, such as the UPSC, NDA, CDS, CAPF, CISF, sometimes a few questions or topics can be repeated in the civil services examination of the same year. Lastly, for prelims, I talk about logical elimination. On YouTube, you will find tons of videos for elimination techniques, tricks, and methods, which can help solve a few more questions. Again, the new pattern of prelims has made it quite difficult to solve using these methods, but they do still help to a certain degree. The important thing is to not just view them as a video when you watch them on YouTube or even if you have joined some course, but to practice them. You have to practice your logical elimination techniques through mock tests, through previous year questions. That will allow you to actually use them in the final exam. Now, the second thing about prelims is the CSAT paper. Earlier, it used to be a fairly convenient paper, but now they have raised the level significantly. Even people from engineering background or maths optional are actually finding the CSAT paper to be quite difficult. So certainly it requires a lot of effort from your on your part. You have to practice CSAT questions. You have to practice previous year questions. So my suggestion would be to understand the different types of questions that are asked in CSAT. Fortunately for me, because I had a background in maths, it was not something that I had to give a lot of time to. But I definitely recommend to everyone to not be overconfident about it and to give it your best. So again, the good thing is that many questions are being asked in CSAT are on similar lines as those that have been asked before. So if you practice previous year questions and you one by one understand the different types of questions that are being asked, you can make notes on the methods for the same. You can understand the nuances involved. Those will help you solve even new questions that are asked on similar lines or even new questions asked in the exam. So CSAT is again, my final words would be that don't neglect it and do give it a good amount of time. Now coming to mains. So the biggest part of mains is the GS, which carries 1,000 marks, and the highest marks usually hover around 470, 480 marks. So the first thing that you have to do for GS is to get a background understanding of the entire syllabus. So for example, you begin by reading with the syllabus for GS 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you start with the basic books. Usually it is recommended to read the NCRTs or the standard textbooks just at a very surface level to get a brief idea of what the topic is about. Because for many of us, political science or geography is something that we left long ago. So now we have to get a brief idea before we go into the details. Then, what I recommend is to pick up topics one by one. Either you can pick up bigger topics like polity all at once, or you can look at the syllabus and take a more micro approach. Personally, I tried to go for the latter. So I would pick up topics. For example, in your GS2 syllabus, it can be mentioned e-governance. So I would try to study from either the material that I have already studied, or I would Google online because many coaching websites have very good material properly organized for all these topics in the syllabus. Then I would make my own notes. I would understand all the topics. I would make my own notes from a mains perspective. Again, viewing the previous year questions of mains will help you understand what kind of questions are asked. What kind of analysis are they asking? Are they asking about the facts? Broadly, what I have seen is prelims relates more to facts, but mains is more to analysis. For example, the issues involved in a particular thing, the benefits of a particular thing, or the consequences, way forward, potentials. So these are things that you can then analyze topic by topic. This will be your first round of GS. That will be the static. Then comes current affairs. Personally, I was not able to give too much time to current affairs, especially for mains, because I chose to give a lot of time to my optional. depending on your optional, how bulky it is and how scoring it is, you will have to manage your mains prep or your GS prep also. For current affairs for mains, the basic idea is that the more important topics have to be covered. For example, editorials. So I used to do editorial compilations or some coaching magazines which would cover the major topics. For prelims, the approach was opposite, to cover more number of topics at lesser depth. But for mains, covering fewer topics but with a decent level of analysis. That is what I have found to help. So now after the basic is done, then to further improve your preparation for mains for GS specifically, then you through answer writing, through mock tests, and then you further build upon your content. So one thing that I have felt helped me get very high marks is value addition. So for example, in GS3, we write about committees, which committee was related to the economic growth, which one related to border security. Then we try to use them in our answers. Similarly, in GS2, there are landmark judgments. For example, the legislature, even related to NGO. A few important things. Number one is that you have to answer the demand of the question. Whatever has been asked, you have to answer that, not what you know on the topic. Now, this is easier said than done because often we do not have enough content about the question that is asked. But still, having a very precise answer, exactly focusing on what has been asked, that is something I believe helps a lot. Secondly, introduction, body, conclusion. And going beyond, we have to we have to organize our answer as per the parts of the question. So one question may have two parts, three parts. So accordingly, we make our headings and we write a good number of points for each of those headings. Personally, I used to try to write a lot of points. I did not focus too much on elaborating on each point, rather on the number of points. For this, what I did, as I mentioned before, is to have topic-wise notes. From each of the micro topic mentioned in syllabus, I would have point form notes well organized. So, for example, in society, urbanization is a topic, globalization is a topic. So I would have notes in point form for each of these topics. Everything on that topic, I would try to keep together so that I can actually use them in the exam. Because the biggest thing about your notes is their applicability. Whatever you have in your notes, you should be able to use them in the exam. It's not just about something you read and it helped you get a broad understanding. The direct usability of those notes is fairly important in mains. Now, coming to the actual exam of those 3 hours. So, the pattern that has been there for the last few years is that 20 questions are asked, 10 markers, and 10 15 markers. The space for each of them is also finite and has been delineated, but the time total we have 3 hours. So it's a lot to write. It's around 50 pages that we have to write in just 3 hours. So managing your time in that duration is again very important. There are multiple ways to manage your time. You can either look at the watch every half an hour, approximately every hour. I personally used to manage time per question. So if you look proportionally, you have to write a 10 marker in approximately 7 minutes and a 15 marker in around 10 minutes. So for every question, I would look at my watch. This ensured that I was able to complete my papers. Now, coming to some additional resources that can help you for your mains, the biggest thing I have found to help me is topper copies. So you can go to the websites of many coachings, whether it is Vision, Vajiram, GS Code, and you can look at the answer copies of toppers, which they wrote for their mock tests. This I used to use not only for analysis, certainly they will help you understand what kind of an answer you have to write, how you have to organize your points, how you have to structure your answer, but also you will get a lot of content from them. I used to use these topo copies for revision also, to get further points to add in my notes, for value addition also, and basically for anything that might help me further improve my answers. So beyond this, it is then more about revising, because for mains especially, but for everywhere in UPSC, revision is extremely important. For mains, practice is also important, whether you are writing answers, you are giving mock tests, or even if you are mentally practicing, just thinking about what to write in a particular answer. And iteratively, then you will improve your marks. If you are not sure of how to further improve your marks, my recommendation would be to again take a look at topper copies, try to compare your answers to them, and then think what they are doing differently or what else you can incorporate to your answers. Now, specifically, I would like to talk more about ethics because I have managed a good score in both of them. So the first round remains the same from any good textbook. I read the book Practical Approach to Ethics by D.K. Balaji sir. He is also an IAS officer. Then I tried to understand each topic by myself, either from the book or through Google or other websites, and made notes for all of them. One thing about ethics is that your genuine understanding will help you rather than just bookish learning. Second thing about ethics is that having a large number of examples on each topic is extremely important. Having examples in your answer, if possible, for every point, that will really boost your score. That is what my experience has been. Other than that, for ethics, case studies is something that is not there in other GS papers. But the good thing is that they are not too different from what have already been asked. So, looking at previous year questions or even mock tests, you will get a good idea about how to write good case studies, and you can then gradually improve upon them. Again, topper copies is something I benefited immensely from. I would even like to mention a few toppers. Shruti Sharma ma'am, she was rank 1 of CSE 2021. Garima Lohia ma'am, Gunjita Agarwal ma'am, Muskan Nagar ma'am. So if you get time, do take a look at these copies, how they are writing their answers, and if there is some content that you can learn from them. I used to literally add points to my notes from these topper copies. So optional now, I would not be talking about maths optional too much here because that is not everyone's optional here. But if there are people who have not chosen an optional yet, so this is a major decision because your optional can actually truly be the decider of whether you will clear this exam or not. The parameters on which I suggest people to choose optional on, number one is the scoring pattern. If an optional has not been yielding good marks for the last few years, then it's not a good idea to go for that optional, irrespective of how much you may like it or how strong you might be. Secondly, is the bulk of the optional. Now, for example, there are optionals like maths optional, geography optional, which are very hectic. They require a lot of effort and they might involve a slight compromise in GS because of the huge amount of time required. Thirdly, is your competence. If you have studied a particular topic or a subject in your graduation, you can go for that. You can even go for something completely different, but that certainly carries the risk of maybe not being competitive enough. So that is something you have to decide. Fourth parameter can also be your interest in the topic because it does get a slightly long journey sometimes. You may have to study it for 1 year or more, and having an interest allows you to study more and do better. So that is about optional. Mains we have covered broadly. Prelims. Interview prep I can just talk about at a very basic level. So I think ma'am will also help in a lot in that. Broadly, the interview is on three basic things. Number one is the form that you fill. It is called the detailed application form. That has all your details, your educational background, where you have stayed, your hobbies. So questions are asked from that. Secondly is current affairs and static, I would say. They may ask questions from the newspaper of that day. They may even ask for regarding a topic that has been in the news for the last 5 months. So I'll just take the doubts after shortly completing. And third thing is general questions on administration. They may give you a situational question and they may ask you your approach on. So again, interview prep does not have to be done right now. It should not be done before you have given your mains. You can wait for result also after your mains, but I personally recommend after your mains is over, then you can begin your interview prep. Again, taking a look at what kind of questions have been asked in the past, that will help you align your prep to it, and also taking a look at how people answer. Now, mock interviews on YouTube are available in plethora. I think most of you would have already come across them. So they give a good representation about what kind of questions are asked and how we have to answer. This covers interview also from my side. I think now we can begin with the doubts, and accordingly, if I missed out on any topic or if any topic has to be covered in depth, then I will go for that. So, opinion on law optional. Now, I don't have a first-hand experience on it, but there are toppers from law optional. If you have graduated on law, it can certainly help you. You can also consider other related options like political science and international relations. So now, anyone having any other doubts or even broad topics that you want me to cover? So CSAT, which mock? So I did not give too many mocks for CSAT. I think vision is usually considered good, but what I would recommend is to give a diversity of mocks. So this applies to GS portion of prelims also, but and again, I'm not very sure about CSAT, but giving one or two mocks from different coachings. Because the good thing is that almost all coachings conduct free open tests that you can find online. For example, Insights does so. Vision has a as a not free, but they have a very famous open test called Abhyas. Forum IAS has CSAT also, they have GS also, and other coachings also you can explore. So you can simply type on Google UPSC CSAT mock test, and then accordingly you can choose. One important thing would be that the solutions are fairly detailed, but also not focusing on redundant things. Now, physics optional, I do know people. I will give ma'am her number, give their number, and you can connect to them. My mock test copies, so some of them have been uploaded on the Vision IS website, and the new ones I will send to ma'am. I will ask her to share with you all. Recommendation for different subjects. So now there are multiple options. One option is to go for coaching material, either if you have joined a coaching or even free coaching materials available online. For books, for the biggest topics, polity, we go for Lakshmikant. Economy, I did Sriram sir's book, Sriram Srirangan sir. For ethics, I mentioned DK Balaji sir's book. For geography, I relied largely on NCRTs. Some people go for other books also, but I think that given the time constraints, NCRTs are sufficient. For modern history, I went for Spectrum. For ancient, medieval, and art and culture, I largely did NCRT, and I focused a lot on previous year questions also. For international relations, earlier I had read the book called Pax Indica, but later I relied later I relied more on current affairs and the basic understanding of static that I did have. For governance, I had joined a coaching earlier, so the material covered in that. Governance is also one topic that you can find a lot of content on different websites. So Insights IAS, I think, IAS Baba, Drishti IAS. These are a few websites. The coachings have their websites where a lot of content is available. You can Google individual topics and you will find a lot of valuable content from there. Other topics, agriculture is a topic which I was not able to find one book. So I used to individually search for each of the topics. For example, agricultural marketing is different, food storage is different, the public distribution system is different. I used to individually Google all these topics and make concise notes from them. Other topics, security, there is a good book of, I think, Rajiv Ahir sir. So you can go through that. For disaster management, earlier it used to be recommended a particular Yojana edition. I will try to get back to ma'am with which edition. Otherwise, also for all book list recommendations, you can take a look at any toppers book list. You will find a lot of them on Google. And again, I will try to give a more comprehensive list to ma'am. So physics, true that guidance regarding physics optional is limited. I will tell ma'am, I will try to connect a friend to ma'am so that he can take a session especially for physics optional. But yes, I think this is also a good point that I missed out. Some optionals do not have a lot of material or guidance available. For example, I'm an electrical engineer, so I had thought about taking that as an optional also, but very few resources were available. Next IAS is one coaching that has a good amount of material for any engineering optional. It might have for physics optional also. So this is also a factor that you can consider. As opposed to this, the more common optionals such as PSIR, sociology, they have material, guidance, everything in abundance. Veterinary as an optional, so sorry, I do not have any idea about it. What I would recommend is taking a look at how many marks people have got in the past, and if any topper talks you can find on YouTube. The good thing these days is that on YouTube you will find strategies on almost everything. So, for example, law optional, physics optional, you can search on YouTube for that optional, and someone or the other would have taken a good strategy talk on that. You can get a good idea about the optional there also. So, again, if you're deciding on your optional, for example, when I'm asked about maths optional, I do tell people that even though it is a very scoring optional, usually the highest scorer is from maths optional, but it is a very hectic optional. So this is something that I got to know after preparing for maths optional. If and so this first-hand experience is definitely valuable. So whatever optional you are considering, you can search a little about it on YouTube or Google regarding a first-hand experience of the toppers, what they talk about that optional, whether they think it was comfortable or it was not a good decision. That will also help you choose better. When should you start ethics? So you can start ethics whenever you start GS also. I used to take one subject at a time. So if I was doing a subject of GS, I would only do that. And then if I'm doing ethics, I would only do that. But usually what people do is they take up multiple subjects at a time. So you can start ethics as early as possible, or it's not something that is urgent either because it is not as large in syllabus as GS1 specifically. GS2 and 3 are somewhere in the middle. but ethics is something you can cover in hardly 10-12 days also to a decent level. Now, the book that I did is D.K. Balaji sir's book, Practical Approach to Ethics. There is another famous book called Lexicon, and I believe G. Subbarao is also another famous book. For your first understanding, you can go for any book. It doesn't really matter too much. You can make notes also from it. Over time, you will fill the gaps. You will look at topper copies. That will also help you handle case studies. For case studies, I used to read a lot of topper copies. I even used to read the solutions of the test series because they will help you answer similar questions when asked in the actual exam. For case studies, again, whichever book you refer, they will have some portion for case studies. Beyond that, it's about practice. So, as I mentioned, the good thing about case studies is that they are asking similar kinds of questions. So, it does not involve too much spontaneity. Definitely, the element of on spot thinking and the case specific points are there, but you will get a good grip on case studies if you have practiced a lot of questions. So, GS geography. So, number one, geography encompasses multiple types of geography. There is physical geography. For that, the NCRT of I think 11th or 12th, that is absolutely sufficient. For Indian geography, in mains, not too many questions are asked, but again, the NCRTs are sufficient. Economic geography, what I did is I Googled the notes. So, for example, there is a topic on syllabus on industries. So, primary, secondary, tertiary industries. I Googled that entire topic, and from different coaching website, I read the material and I extracted my own notes. So, one more thing that a lot of toppers have uploaded their notes on Telegram or on different websites. You can go through them also. Either you can make them your base reading material, or if you have prepared your own notes, you can further enhance your notes through them. You can go through them, you can revise through them also, or you can add points to your notes. So definitely do check out topper notes. They will also help you understand how to make notes. Now, how long to cover maths optional? It does take a lot of time. It definitely depends on your background and whether you're only doing maths or you're doing maths and GS together. So I would say it can take anywhere around 7 to 10 months. What I had done for maths optional, I did not join coaching, but there are multiple famous coachings now. There is IMS for maths called Institute for Mathematical Sciences. There is a coaching called Mathocrat. There is Success Clap, Next IAS. And if I think of few more, I will tell ma'am. So what I did is I took the coaching material of a coaching. I studied all the topics from there. Now, fortunately for me, maths was my strong topic, so I did not require coaching classes. But whenever I did, I would just watch that topic on YouTube. So Mathocrat YouTube channel has free lectures on all topics. You can cover almost entire syllabus from there. So you can definitely consider that. If you require coaching, then you can also join a live batch, which may have some additional benefits. But I feel that reading material plus YouTube can actually be sufficient for maths. Then for maths, the more important, and also for maths, you can refer to the standard books also. Kanish Kataria sir has a book list. You can find it on Google. Prakash Raj Purohit sir, he has also uploaded a book list. Nitish Kumar sir, he has given a book list, and many other topics. Even Utsav Kaushal sir, I think, has given a book list. So the books are largely common. You can pick any of them. The important thing is to remain aligned to exam. So don't cover those topics which are not in the exam syllabus. So again, do look at the syllabus properly and also take a look at previous year questions. In maths, often questions are directly repeated. So you definitely should look at previous year questions. World history and medieval. Right. So world history is one topic that if you look at the past 5 years of mains, I think not even a single question has been asked. So again, this is only the pattern of the last 5 years. It's possible that next year 3 questions might be asked from it, but this is one of the topics that I kept as a low priority. So I had done my coaching material from Sriram's IAS I had done. So I used that for my first reading. After that, what I did is I looked at the previous year questions. For GS1 specifically, I would suggest this approach for world history, for modern history, for art and culture, and for geography also. There are some common themes that are being repeated, such as ocean current circulation in geography, air pressure, then World War One, World War Two. These are often repeated in in world history. So these are the topics around which you can form your notes. Again, for world history, the book that is recommended is I think Arjun Dev NCRT. For world history, some people recommend Norman Low, but I will not recommend it because I feel it is not worth the time, given that in the last few years, not even a single question has been asked. Medieval, again, usually not more than one question is asked, but NCRT will help you build the base of knowledge. Then it is simply about applying that knowledge. Again, for history, definitely look at previous year questions to see what topics are being asked, the major themes, and also what kind of questions are being asked. Now, mapping practice, sorry, how much effort do we need to put to them? So again, these are both low priority topics. Much more effort should go into society, polity, international relations, economy, security, agriculture. These are topics from which at least 3 to 4 questions are being asked every year. World history, definitely don't give too much time. Medieval, ancient also, you can keep it for after you are done with these important topics. Definitely don't skip them altogether, because even though the trend has been that not a lot of questions are asked from there, but you never know what might happen the next year. Now, mapping practice. So, what I used to do, number one is through mock tests regarding mains. Then, what you can do is to just prepare maps for some of the most important topics, such as I think resource distribution. I had a few maps on the important resources like coal, iron, nuclear power plants. That will broadly be sufficient. For prelims, you need to know a lot about places in news. So that mapping has two aspects. Number one is places in news. Other is some static portions. Static portions largely revolve around India, such as rivers, hills, mountains. So I literally simply just Googled about rivers in India, mountains in India, plateaus in India. I downloaded those maps and I used to often look at them. I tried to actively derive some interesting points from them, such as if there is a river, how many states is it going through? So naturally, you have to keep your scope limited. You cannot be looking at every small detail. You can manage as per your time, and you can realign as per the questions that have been asked in either in test series or in the actual exam. Then, other than that, for places in news, lately a lot of questions are being asked from this. So this is a relatively difficult portion also, and I think in the actual exam also many tough questions were asked. Broadly, it is about current affairs. So, for example, if the Israel-Hamas war was there, so places around that are important. If some nuclear power plant in Ukraine was in news, that becomes important. So for current affairs, so again, current affairs will help you this. And other thing is on YouTube, some coachings upload series dedicated to mapping. So earlier there was a coaching, I think Samjho Learning, that used to upload a series on mapping. There is also a coaching called Target UPSC that can also help in this direction. Otherwise, you can also take a look at Atlas for the themes that are being asked in exam or which have been asked in your test series. Now, art and culture again for a coaching. I mean, you can find a lot of divisions of the previous year questions organized into themes. So you can simply Google it. You will find what themes are covered in mains for art and culture. It may be about social reform. It may be about the literature of foreigners, such as the Arabic culture, which what the Persian culture, what influence it had on India. Those kind of questions are asked. I think in 2021 question was asked on that. So you can then form your notes as per that. Again, resources are NCRT. And if you get time, then you can selectively refer to Nitin Singhania, or you can even watch a lecture on YouTube. Now for essay. So in both my years, I had only average marks. So I would recommend that definitely after this, do take a look at some high scorers talk. But essay is one area that does not require too much time. Even the highest scorers have managed to get very high marks despite not giving it a lot of time. The types of questions that are asked. Earlier, it used to be one topic from a GS based topic and one from philosophical. In the last 3 years, they have only asked philosophical essays, but next year it might change again. They may ask from GS also. The GS topics, broadly, you will get content from your GS topics itself. For philosophical essays, for the content, I do not recommend any specific source because I think it will end up taking a disproportionate amount of your time and you may not get any direct content for the same. So, what becomes more important for essay is how to write your essay. Again, there are both structural parts and non structural parts. For structural parts, first, I think the common thing is that you begin with an introduction around one and a half page. Then you divide your essay into a few themes, headings also, if you want, or otherwise, no, without headings. You write for around 8 to 9 pages, and then again, you conclude your essay. It may involve a sum up or even a way forward, but total you have to write around 12 pages or around 1000 to 1200 words. Now, coming to the non structural parts, Some ways to enhance your essay a little is to either reference some thinker or some book. So you may not have even read the entire book, but if you have heard about the book, for example, I think you might have heard of the book Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. So if you have a rough idea of what that book teaches, you can use it in your essay. Then something is quotes and proverbs, even maxims. So, for example, Rome was not built in one day. Such kind of things again add to your essay. They can help you gain a few extra marks. And the bulk of your essay will revolve around the topic. You have to create dimensions for that topic, whatever topic you have been given. So, for example, I wrote on not all those who wander are lost. That was a topic this year. So, I tried to number one, I approached the topic with historical evidences. People who did wander, did they get lost or did they explore something? So naturally, the first thing when I picked this essay topic was to understand the topic, what it means. It's talking about exploration, and sometimes even seemingly directionless people do figure out important things. So we can think of tangible examples such as the navigators and geographical explorers who actually found land, or we can even think of it in intangible terms, such as an inventor like Nikola Tesla. He may have faced a lot of hurdles. He may not have been sure about what he's doing, but ultimately he did come up with very important scientific discoveries. So, understanding the topic is the first thing. Then you divide it into different dimensions, approach the topic from different angles. So, for example, here it could be that what are the different possible meanings of getting lost? Does it mean that you don't know where you're going? Does it mean you've hit obstacles? Or does it mean that what you're doing is simply fruitless? Then you can talk about examples, people who did wander and got lost. And then you can talk about examples of people who wandered but were not lost. They ended up discovering something. So having a balanced perspective is something that I feel is important. But again, I repeat my disclaimer that I had average marks in both years. So I think I'll ask ma'am to connect with some other topper also for a more detailed strategy on essay. Again, one common advice that remains is taking a look at topper copies of essay. It would be better to look at the toppers of last few years because now the level of questions has risen significantly. I think last year, Gautam Vivekanandan sir, he had a very good marks. He had 150 plus, I think. You can take a look at his copies or any topper. I think you can find essay toppers. You can just Google and you will find their topper copies invariably. Otherwise, you can go to any coaching's website and take a look at that. So, history or sociology. So, again, I personally, I do not have experience of any option other than maths. So sociology is an optional that sometimes does well, sometimes does not. This applies to actually all humanities optionals. History, I think, is a bit more bulkier than sociology, but this is also something that I will try to connect someone I know to ma'am. And both of them are good in terms of the number of resources available, test series. I think sociology is a more commonly picked optional, but both of them are fairly rewarding. This year also, I think some people did have around 300 marks in history. Sociology, last year, many people did have 280, 290 marks. I'm not very sure about this year. Is 1 year enough to prepare and clear the exams, or should I take 2 years gap break? So, actually, the thing is, there is nothing such as how much time is enough to prepare and clear the exam. There are many examples you will find. Some people who cleared in their first attempt, some people who could not clear in even in 5 or 6 attempts. So it's not just about effort. It's also about right strategy. Sometimes it's about other constraints, and sometimes it's also about luck. But what I personally recommend is to start prep around 1 to 1.5 years before you give your first attempt. Because the idea is that before you give your prelims, your mains should be at a decent stage. So that hopefully if you do clear prelims that year, then between those prelims and mains, you are able to take your mains prep to your fullest potential or to an adequately good level. So now, whether you should take a break or not, that I think will depend on how much you have already done and how you are studying right now. But otherwise, 1 year is a good time. If you can study dedicatedly, you can definitely go ahead. So mental stress in the preparation, definitely it does get stressful, especially if you have not taken up a job and you are preparing for the exam whole time. It does get stressful. Often, if you're studying at home, then you do feel that your friends are out there working, having fun also. So all those feelings do come. The first thing to realize is that everyone is going through them. So it's not just you or just us that we are going through it. Everyone does face such issues. Now, what I used to do for it, either I would take a break, I would either watch TV series, or I would listen to music, or even I used to play chess sometimes. Other than that, I would try to talk to my friends, either my college friends or those friends who were giving the exam with me. So discussing with them, number one, it reminded me that everyone is stressful, is under stress, everyone is feeling the same amount of nervousness. So that helped me boost my confidence also. And talking to friends is, I believe, a good way to relieve some anxiety. Something that you did on your free time. So again, sometimes I used to watch TV series. Sometimes I would just watch fun videos on YouTube, listen to music. One thing that I would recommend is to not take up a hobby that is too time engaging. Sometimes if let's say you're spending 2 or 3 hours per day, then that will certainly affect your prep. Which subjects should we start with? So if you have a good amount of time, then there is no issue. You can either take up any schedule that coachings are helping you with, or you can start in order GS1, GS2, GS3, GS4. If you have a time constraint, and I think a lot of people do face time constraint without realizing it, then the more important topics that should be taken up: polity, economy, agriculture, security, international relations, society, modern Indian history, geography. Especially this list that I just gave is for mains because multiple questions are asked from these topics. For prelims also, polity, economy, and modern history, these are the most important. Security is not there in prelim syllabus. Agriculture to some extent is there, but the for mains definitely these topics are the first. Then what you should do is you take a look at the syllabus, the individual topics mentioned in the syllabus, as well as the previous year questions. Then try to take up topic one by one. Again, strategy remains same. Either you refer to some textbook, do it selectively, or you Google the topic. Environment, science and tech in exam. So in prelims, a lot of questions are asked from these topics, but these are also a bit difficult. I personally felt that the questions being asked from them are difficult, but not too difficult. The most of these questions are from current affairs, except I think in one of the years, a lot of basics from environment were asked. So definitely do the basics also. There is an NCRT which deals with the basics of environment. I think it's a biology NCRT of class 12 that covers these topics exhaustively. And current affairs, the Hindu newspaper for environment and science and tech is very important. And all coaching compilations do cover these topics very comprehensively. What the important, so try to cover more number of topics, but at a basic level only. For example, a question that was asked last year, I think, the Volbuchia method. What is it related to? So you only need to have a surface level prep of what this topic is about. You don't need to have a very thorough understanding of how this was developed, who developed it, or any other intricacies. A surface level knowledge, that is what my experience has been, is very helpful for prelims. For mains also, environment and science and tech, a decent number of questions are asked. Broadly, if your knowledge from the basics of static of these is intact, and if you have done a good number of topper copies and looked at the previous year questions, then you will be able to answer these. Even from current affairs, sometimes very random questions are asked, but you do not need to worry about them. They are difficult for everyone. And if you're able to just write a decent answer based on your static knowledge, then that will be good enough. So, which monthly magazine did you follow? For mains, I did look at Insights editorial compilation. Sometimes I also did, I think, Drishti IAS editorial compilation. Forum IAS has a good magazine called Epic. So these were largely what I did. For prelims prep, I used to look at the yearly compilations, but again, I used to do them for prelims in a very selective manner. So I looked at the topic, and based on my experience, which I had gained in my 2 attempts, so I knew I had a good understanding of whether this topic is important or not, and to what level I need to do this. So accordingly, I gave that much amount of time per topic. So strategy for presentation in GS. So presentation, even though in my mock tests, if you find on the coaching website, I used to present answers in a very elaborate manner, but I don't think it's very important. The biggest thing is to structure your answer as per the parts of parts mentioned in the question. So a little trick for this is to use the exact words that have been mentioned in the question. For example, if the question is, what are the potentials of artificial intelligence in healthcare? Then your heading should be potentials of artificial intelligence in healthcare. Don't use a heading advantages of AI in healthcare or benefits of AI. Explicitly using the exact words mentioned in the question. This has two advantages. Number one, it gives a signal to the examiner that you have answered exactly what has been asked. Number two, you yourself will answer exactly what is asked. You will not go a little away from the topic. You will not deviate. You will answer exactly what is asked. Secondly, regarding how I used to organize my points. So once a heading is given, I would just write points as they came to my mind. Sometimes people do recommend to further organize your points, but I think that takes up a lot of time, which we do not have in the exam paper. And regarding presentation in terms of decorating your answer in terms of arrows and boxes, some people do it. In my actual exam, I did not do it, but I still got a good score, so I wouldn't say it's necessary. Distribute your slots. I'm not sure. Are you talking about my studying or in the actual exam journey for UPSC? So there were definitely ups and downs. In my first attempt, I was not able to clear prelims. That was a little bit of disappointment because I had studied a lot for it. But something that fortunately I knew because multiple of my seniors had given the exam that it is a tough journey. It sometimes it does require two, three, four attempts, but staying strong, continuously studying, learning from your mistakes, that is the most important thing. After I did not clear prelims in my first attempt, I did not just get disappointed or blame luck. Rather, I learned from my mistakes. The first mistake was that I had over focused on my current affairs in my first attempt and underestimated the static. Because of that, I came up with a strategy of surface level horizontal coverage, which I mentioned earlier regarding current affairs. And also, what I realized is the importance of quality and economy in prelims because relatively easy, known questions are coming from these topics. So, these are the areas that you have to have a good command on. Other than that, also ups and downs are fairly common. I think it's about having that discipline, number one, and motivating yourself repeatedly. If your friends are giving the exam, you can talk to them frequently. That will also help. Attempt UPSC 25 overall framework. So broadly, I would recommend that within this year you should cover mains. So have a good command over your static topics. Complete your syllabus as far as possible, including optional. It's okay if something is remaining. And next year around January or February, you can begin your prelims preparation. Uh, Whether you want to do mains side by side, that is up to you. I personally did not used to do because in my first attempt I had failed the prelims. But if this year or latest by mid-January you can get a good command over mains, then after shifting to prelims, then that will be very helpful. Also, what I would recommend is to try to come up with your own notes within this year itself. If you're planning to completely rely on topper notes, that is also fine. But if you're planning to make your own notes, then try to make them within this year itself. Because between prelims and mains, in those 100 days, that is not enough for you to make notes. That is the time where you should revise your notes and practice. Someone who is weak in arithmetic section. So definitely first advice would be that you have to practice a good amount. You will have to give a good amount of time to this, practice multiple questions. But secondly, don't arbitrarily practice in any haphazard manner. Try to, I think many coachings would have already organized the previous year questions into different themes or different types of questions. For example, every year one or two questions are asked on calendar based questions, such as if today is Thursday, if today is Saturday, then 2 years from now, what day will it be? These kinds of questions are asked almost every year. So once you understand them, then in the future you will be able to tackle such questions. Similarly, some questions on water being filled in a well. So get a good idea about the different types of questions and individually pursue them. So you can look at the method involved, you can make your own notes. Then one by one, for each type of question, you practice them. Then the last step would be to practice mock tests and even the last few years previous year questions. One more thing you can do is to take a look at YouTube. A lot of CSAT series are there. I have not personally referred to any, but I have heard good things about many. PYQ for last 5 years. So basic idea is that you start backwards. First, you look at the previous year question of CSE 23, then CSE 22, then 21, and go as far as back as possible. Usually it is recommended 10 years, but if you have time constraint, 5 years is also good. For optionals such as maths optional, questions are repeated. So 10, 15 years would be a good idea, but not too back, not for 2008 or so, because the syllabus was also slightly different. This might apply to other optionals also. For GS, again, last 7, 8 years is a good idea. You will get a good understanding of the themes that are being asked. For prelims, positive and negative points for an essay question. So yes, usually you should try to balance your essay. Sometimes it might be that the topic has only one side and there is no other side, but mostly there are both sides, or rather there are multiple sides to the essay. And as per my understanding, it is a good idea to cover all these sides. Perfect conclusion. So what I used to do is first I essay. So, for example, in introduction, there is something called a thesis statement where you talk about in this essay, we will cover this, we will cover this, then we will talk about this. Similarly, I used to sum up that in this essay, I have talked about this, we have covered this, so and so. Then I would try to give a more futuristic picture. I would use a proverb or some. I think one thing I did is use a speech also, John F. Kennedy's speech, one which I had specifically memorized for essay only. So you can prepare such content by looking at topper copies also, and through your own essays that you write in mock tests, they will help you prepare for the same. And again, regarding perfect conclusion, definitely take a look at topper copies of high scorers of essay. How many hours? I used to study around 10, 11 hours per day. Sometimes it would be quite low also, especially when I had been studying for already for 1 to 2 years. I did get tired a bit. Sometimes there would be days where I would not be able to study even for 2 or 3 hours. But average, I would say, was upwards of 8 to 9 hours. So the long term consistency is what matters. How to start answer writing practice? So you can, whatever topic you have completed, let's say you have completed governance, take a look at the previous year questions of that topic and start writing them. Initially, even if you were writing very not good answers, that's completely fine. But at least you will break that inertia and gradually you will learn how to write answers. Parallelly, take a look at topper copies about how answers are to be written, what your eventual target is. So you will gradually move towards that. You can also consider joining some course dedicated for answer writing, but it's not necessary. Looking at topper copies and comparing your answer with them, that will help you a lot. So what should one not do during interview round? So that is, I think that is a very broad question. But yes, it's true that many people make it to interview but don't make it in the final list. It can be both due to low marks in mains or low marks or poor performance in interview. Interview is one round that I feel it does involve a good amount of luck because the questions that are asked are different to everyone. Last year I had 187 marks, which was decent. This year I had 160 marks, which is a bit low. And even from the questions, I could tell that this year the questions were quite tough, in my opinion, whereas last year they were of the normal level. So sometimes that element is also there. Otherwise, sometimes simply the nervousness during the interview that can affect your performance. Preparation for interview is fairly comfortable. There is not too much to do compared to mains, and there is a good amount of time. Building on your personality is also to some extent important, especially learning to talk in a formal manner to the senior bureaucrats or the senior people taking our interview. Practicing the pressure simulation through mock interviews, especially offline if possible, that helps a lot. So again, what not to do, that will, I think, take a specific session dedicated to interview. I think ma'am can cover that better than me. Strategies of selection of question in prelims. So yes, definitely the new pattern is very difficult, and question selection is, it's not easy to have a strategy for that. My approach was that I will read the full question. One mistake that I used to also make, and sometimes people make, is that they just glance at the question, and if they feel that the topic is unfamiliar to them, then they just skip it. So, this is something I will advise against. Often, the most difficult seeming questions are actually fairly simple, especially if you have covered all aspects of prep, including your static, current, previous year questions, and also logical elimination. Sometimes the questions are very easy, even if they are completely unfamiliar to you. So, definitely read the question, then give around 30 seconds. If then I'm not able to solve it, then I will skip it, keep it for later. One thing that you should not do is to get stuck in any question. This is especially important in CSAT, that you should not end up giving too much time to one question. In maths questions, it does happen at times. You have given 4 or 5 minutes and you're continuously giving it even more time. That is, I believe, a big trap. And you have to remember that all questions carry the same amount of marks. So if you're not able to make progress with a question in, let's say, 30 seconds, move to the next question. You can come back to it. One more thing I want to point out here in CSAT is that do manage your time well. Because for prelims, for prelims, I forgot to mention time management strategy. Broadly, my approach was that I will give one comprehensive round. I would cover all questions from 1 to 100. Like I mentioned, that I read the question, gave 30 seconds. If I was able to solve, I would solve it. If I was not, then I would skip it. But this one round, I would try to cover in around 70 to 80 minutes. Then I would fill the answers in my OMR. Then I will come back to those questions I was not able to solve. For CSAT, initially I did the maths portion because I was relatively comfortable in maths. I gave around 70 to 75 minutes for maths. This was a deadline which I kept because even after 75 minutes, there were a few questions which I had not been able to do, but I did not revisit them at that moment. I then went to the comprehension section, completed it. Then, if I had time left, I would come back to the maths portion. So, whichever strategy you are using, the important thing is you try it in mock tests. Don't go to the exam hall and directly experiment with a strategy. Ensure that you have tried and tested it in mock tests because for everyone, strategy will be different. One more thing in CSAT, one mistake people make is to go with the mindset that they will focus more either on the comprehension portion or on the maths portion. So I am saying it very clearly in both maths area and comprehension area, there are easy questions and there are difficult questions. Some of my friends made this mistake of only doing the maths portion. They did not even touch comprehension. What they did not realize that there were many easy questions in comprehension, but they instead wasted their time on the difficult question of maths. So remember, every question is carrying equal marks. Focus on the easier questions. YouTube sources. So yeah, for current affairs, I'm not sure if I should individually state all of them or give a list to ma'am. But some sources I liked for current affairs. Sunya IAS for current affairs rapid revision. Target UPSC also had a good YouTube series for revision. IAS Baba had a good environment current affairs. That is very selective and very pinpointed, which I was talking about. For static, some good compilations are there which help you revise the standard textbooks in a very concise manner. So, Vayesh IS is a coaching which has a YouTube series on modern Indian history. Atish Mathur sir's channel has polity. There is a coaching called Get Into IAS, which has series on environment and economy, which were also good. So again, you can simply type on YouTube whichever topic you want content on, give it a few minutes. If you think it is concise and good and it is aligned to the exam, then you can go forward with it. The only thing is don't go for very bulky video series. Otherwise, they're not optimal because there are alternatives which are concise, more pinpointed, and meeting the demands of the exam. Mistakes you made in your previous attempts. So first attempt, the mistake I made in prelims, number one was overemphasizing on current affairs. I had done too many coaching magazines and I thought that my static was good simply because I had read the standard books 2 or 3 times. But the important thing is that you have to be able to solve the questions from static because in the actual exam, 2 or 3 questions from polity and 1 or 2 questions from economy, which were fairly standard questions. Those questions I was not able to do and I missed the cutoff by just 5 marks. So that was my major learning to focus more on static, especially polity and economy have to be strong. Current affairs, which I realized then, you should not mindlessly chase current affairs just because you think that a question can come from this. So with current affairs, the thing is that it's very fun. It's new material. It's relatively convenient to read it. So a lot of people chase current affairs, but again, static is the bigger priority. And for current affairs, you have to keep it aligned to the exam, the kind of questions that are being asked, and selectively read it. For mains, broadly, what I learned was related to maths optionals. So I don't think I should talk about it particularly here, but I have spoken about it on a video on Delhi Knowledge Track on YouTube. How to solve this type of question was so yeah, sometimes it does happen that you know 2 statements, but to arrive at the answer, you need to know all 4. This is a very difficult pattern that UPSC has now come up with. So some amount of risk will be involved. Broadly, if you know at least 1 or 2 statements, then you have eliminated at least 1 or 2 options. So you should definitely go forward with attempting that question. It may be that you simply have to guess between the remaining options, or you can use some amount of logic or any thought process that you might have, or again, the indirect application of knowledge that you may have from what you have accumulated from static current affairs. But again, it does involve a good amount of risk, and that is why prelims has become very difficult. For economic papers, so I hope you're talking about GS3, because economic optional, I do not know about it. For the GS3 papers, current affairs also you have to do, but again, focus more on the broader topics. So questions do come from the smaller topics also, but only one or two questions, number one. And number two, those questions are then difficult. It's more about managing your time, because ideally you should do everything. You should do static also, current affairs also, previous year questions also, test series also. But you will realize, whether you may have realized already or you will realize eventually, time is a constraint and prioritization has to be done. So number one thing, have a strong command over static. This is my approach. Definitely people may have a different approach to it. Have a strong command over static, especially all the topics mentioned in the syllabus. Second, then cover current affairs, only the more important topics. Editorial compilation is a good way for that. And see, one thing I have learned is that if you have covered the themes and topics from syllabus well, then you will be able to write something or the other in current affairs topics also. For example, inclusive growth is there in the GS3 syllabus. If you have prepared that very well, if you have a lot of content for it, then if a question is asked, say, on some report by some organization or some coefficient, then you will be able to manage writing a good answer for that. How to remember and recall what you read? So, two or three things. Number one, try to prepare notes in point form in a concise manner. Having notes in point form is one of the best things that I did. Second, having those notes very concise so that you can revise them multiple number of times. So what I used to do is, when first I read all the topics, then I individually prepared notes for topics one by one. Then the innovative thing that I did is to make a new set of notes from my notes itself. This is what I called micro notes, and these were very concise. So I would not even write full statements. I would just write keywords. For example, if I have a point in my notes that funding for this so and so, let's say education, has to be improved, in my micro notes, I will just write funding, or I will write budgetary allocation. So just it will help you retain more. Third thing that you have to do is to revise. So revision is an undeniable aspect of this exam for all three stages. One more thing that you can do is active recall. So so this is something you can Google about. It's when you write answers or when you write mock tests, what you're doing is you are recalling what you have already studied. So this is what is said to help you retain better, and it will help you build long-term memory. Um, so one more question had come, but I think it got deleted. So I think,
Sir?
did I miss out on any question?
Sir,
Yes, ma'am.
I think if I mean like I think you're already tired, right? Because it's already 1 hour.
Yes, ma'am.
Don't have any more questions, then we can stop here.
Sure, ma'am. And if there are any other questions, they can, I think you can send them to me. I will be happy to answer them.
Okay, so sir, thank you so much for your time. I'm sure that you'll be an officer, not just a smart officer with good knowledge, but also you'll be an empathetic officer. And I'm sure that India, the future of India will be bright because we've got good officers like you, because you're now in a position of an officer, bring a lot of changes to the people. So I'm so proud of you and I'm so happy for you. So yeah, thank you so much for your time, sir, and all the
Thank you,
best.
ma'am. Thank you so
Thank,
much. And a very best of luck to everyone. Thank you so
thank you.
much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.